All right, away we go. It is Wednesday, January 7th of 2026. The clock turns to another year. Amazing how fast time goes by when you're having fun. And this is the Profitable Real Estate Agent Plan call, which we do where we go through all of our strategic plan. And I love this call because it just keeps me rooted myself inside of all of the things that we're supposed to be doing strategically. And then obviously, because most of you are Griffins or TRCers, we can get into training and talking about very specific things that matter to you. So really getting down into the tactical stuff where, you're really trying to figure out exactly what it is that you're doing. And I would say this too, Paul and I had some conversations around this week when it comes to agents. It's one thing to be a really good student of this stuff. I think it's another thing to, you want to make sure that you get into a spot where you're really paying attention to getting yourself into action mode, right? I mean, action mode is where you actually see what this is like and what people are really like when you're talking to them. I think that's a really, really important thing that I've learned over time is that if I'm not in an open house, for example, or if I'm not in listing presentations, I'm really not getting any better at this at all. And so I think that's, an important thing to pay attention to. And to that extent, you get this fear gap, I think. And we talked about this. And in this plan, which I'll just reiterate where we've been, where we are today. And I really apologize. It's the holidays. I am away next week in England. So there is no way I'll be up in the middle of the morning doing one of these. So we'll finish up. We'll skip next week and then we'll do two. And then we'll have a reset. And I might start it sooner than usually, the 2-week lapse, because we've missed so many weeks. And I don't like to lose momentum because this is training your brain to behave a certain way, which is why I opened up by saying a lot of this is very much the head stuff. And I'm going to give a keynote speech in March where I usually go for the gang up in Metro City where they have a big event. And I told Sarah Corey that I was going to open up absolutely 100% talking about the head stuff. And so the head stuff is really what keeps you from implementing and executing a very simple plan. And it is amazing to me after all these years of coaching, and I'm in my 23rd year of coaching and my 26th or 27th year technically of being a broker. So it's a long time. And I'm still astounded at how powerful our animal brain can be to keep your thermostat set very low, just barely warm. And it's very powerful. And you have to recognize that. So when we go through a course like this, it's important that I remind you it is the operator very much that gets in the way of the execution of a simple plan, because the plan itself is simple. After the beating on this plan for all of those years and my obsession to do so and reading books and assimilating information and having refinements done as we go along, it really still comes back to that the thing is just easy. It's easy. I mean, it really is. There's not anybody in here that can't understand what I'm talking about in this 12-step course. But every single one of you, all of my one-on-one coaching clients, anyone I've ever run into, is going to have to face the bear every day. And the bear is the battle between the part of your brain that wants to be here tonight and sit here and grind through a learning to get better because there's something better in you. There's definitely a better real estate agent, let alone a better human being, a higher thriving persona. It's there and you know it and we all know it. And that's our burden as humans. We know that. Isn't it a shame sometimes that we're not just animals and we can't just accept being good at hunting and gathering and not really endeavoring to be more? But that's just not us. So we have this dilemma that we have in the background, now the foreground, every time we talk. Okay. So to reiterate, in the first week, I break down in this course how stupid simple this system can be when you look at it from Michael Gerber's lens and you make it into a one-page infographic on how the business works. And very oftentimes when I'm coaching anybody, including myself, or I'm working on my business, I get up above the whole business. I don't just sit here and talk about leads or a script. Those are all micro issues inside of a business, for example, those two. I get up above it and I say, like, for example, I'll tell you, I was helping somebody who had an expired listing themselves. Their listing was expiring. And his perception was that, well, this person, didn't start, nope. You got to go all the way back to the beginning of your business and ask yourself, What was the genesis of that lead to prospect? What was the source? In other words, you found this lead, you brought it to this, so you can manage yourself and your business if you understand that model, which I go over in the first week. In the second week, I say, but we're doing this for the money. So let's not be fools and pretend that we're not. This isn't a charity. You want to do something for a charity, not make any money, start a charity. This is a business. And so to bring a profit to a business, which is the title of this course, you have to start with a gross revenue number. And we put that out in the stars. We name it, we make it specific, and we target it. Because what's stunning is that the greatest part of this is the third week, where we teach you that once you set a goal, you can actually let the subconscious mind do a lot of the listening here, the programming at this course, and it will be resourceful enough to keep you on target for that goal. And it will make its adjustments much like a guided missile makes its adjustments on its way to its goal. Then we start to break down and get into the actual business stuff, really at more of almost a tactical level, but it's still a strategic conversation by saying, listen, content is king, okay? And you have to understand in the context of our business, because we are a service business, content is everything to us. But what kind of content? Not some social media dance, with a watch and a fancy car, but more so information that's organized and bundled in what's called an information product to be ready to be given to sellers and buyers. That's week 4. Week 5 talks about how you then are able to articulate how you're going to take someone through a process, which is really a unique selling proposition. See, a lot of people, when we talk about marketing, they don't understand that they have to even make a core piece of content. They don't even understand what a unique selling proposition is or how to demonstrate that. It's not one line that you say, I used to take umbrage with my former, long time ago now, mentor, and I hated this, your home sold guaranteed, or I buy it for cash. I hated it. I thought it was a gimmick. I didn't like it. And it wasn't a unique selling proposition. It was a bait and switch. Whereas I discovered that if we could create an information product that lays out for a seller from start to finish how they're going to sell their house, and the same for a buyer, how they're going to buy a house, then we were demonstrating a unique professionalism by actually being one of the only ones in this competitive environment that does it that way, hence making it unique. So really powerful 1-2 punch on weeks 4 and 5. 6, just because you get all hyped up on this stuff and we get excited and everybody starts to understand it, doesn't mean it's a message to match all the time, right? Message to market match is what you need. In other words, an ideal avatar like client. Avatar is an ideal depiction. And we talk about what that is. And in our systemology here, what we do is we break that down really to match the financial goal that we've already talked about. What's the fastest path to the financial goal? That starts to define avatar from the demographics. In other words, is it a seller? Demographically, do they own a property in the area we want to do business? And financially, are they a median or at least a close to the median priced property? And we talk about all of that avatar first, the seller avatar, and then the buyer avatar. Then that allows us to be smart by the time we finally arrive at leads. And I can't tell you how often it's actually getting easier, quite frankly, because people are believing that lead generation, which is what the naive, young, or early in the business broker believes is most important. Leads, leads, leads. You wouldn't even know what to do with the amount of leads that you could find on the internet, in this business, elsewhere. You wouldn't even know what to do with them unless you had already defined the avatar, because there's too many of them. I just dealt with another one of my clients, a long-term client, been with me many, many years. And I dealt with him today and talking about his team. And I was just saying, look at, there's no way you're overwhelming a couple of these people with asking them to even dive into a pile of leads because there's too many of them. So the animal brain shuts down. So that's my point. There's too many of them. So why don't we just focus on avatar, the ideal lead, which is a seller at or above the median in the geography we want? Why don't we start there? So that's how we rolled into the lead generation. Now, of course, it doesn't preclude a discussion about buyers. That would be absurd. But where do the best avatar buyers come from? And the answer is certainly not the internet. I think Paul and I also discussed this the other day. There was definitely a window in time where you could get fantastic buyers off the internet because the internet lead capture site was so new. Everybody was using it in excitement, but then all the good smart buyers got burnt out, realizing that everybody was buying their name and their contact information when they opted in, and the best buyers just started to slowly disappear. And these lead generation sites became loaded with whimsical increase from people that aren't really even serious about buying, and when they were, most of the time that they were below the median price. I'm not saying that you can't make money above, but it's much more difficult. So that's chapter number 7 in this course, is extremely important in the discussion, but more so that it took 6 weeks to arrive at it intelligently so that you're set up there. Then obviously scripts. I mean, people, I can't tell you how many telemarketers, when we're recruiting them, we say to them, well, did you have a script? Well, they gave me something, then I made it my own. And that's how scary it is that businesses leave the articulation of a unique selling proposition up to somebody's human discretion that has no idea and is not anybody well studied at this level that they would know why. So you have to write these scripts, and they have to be rooted in real human laws of influence. Because again, I'll repeat, just because you discover a really good, unique way of doing business does not mean it's effective unless you learn how to articulate it. And I've been listening to recorded calls for the better part of, let me think, I probably started listening to them in a coaching capacity. I started doing them in 2001, 2002. I started coaching them really between 2003, 2006. I say because formally I started as a coach in 2006, but I was a volunteer coach before that. So think about how many years of phone calls I've listened to, thinking about how many scripts I've had to consider and ask myself whether they were strategically attracting the right avatar. So I've had an enormous amount of experience doing that. And I'm telling you, I would personally never try to speak to somebody without a scripted performance. So for me, that these days, that's definitely my script in an open house and my scripted way that I would go about my listing presentation in a house. And of course, a buyer presentation too, when I'm in those open houses. But scripts are everything. And then that's going to work. How about that? That's just going to work. If you can find the head stuff to maintain the discipline that it takes to execute this stuff against the animal brain that tells you not to do any of it, right? If you can discipline and win, you're going to create a contact who is now a prospect. That's the first step from lead to prospect, somebody that you know why they're doing it, and it's a real why. You know that they're motivated on a scale of 9 to 10. They can kind of see themselves doing that inside the next 12 months. And more importantly, they've accepted your unique way of doing business, which is giving them information, keeping up with that. And then you have to continue that to protect them. And the crazy irony about prospects is you just don't need that many of them to be successful. But if you don't put them up on a scoreboard, and all of you, like I said, most of you are intimately part of the group. So you have the Contact Pipeline Manager, which was designed to show money attached to prospects, which relates back to the financial goals. Duh, right? Like I say that because I'm saying, can you believe it's that simple? But it is. And that leads to tonight. After all of this work and all of this understanding and all of this caring for these prospects against these wolves, what does it look like when you onboard a listing? What does it look like when you onboard a buyer? And they're very different. So I'm going to talk about them both tonight. From the previous courses, I've combined these two. So I have to go through 2 slideshows, and I will go through them. And at the end of them, we will talk about it. But that's how much work strategically it takes to think properly about how you arrive at these moments in a business much more properly, and it begins to deliver you a very strategic result. I am more than happy to have been the crash test dummy for this whole systematic approach. And I would say that when we really started getting our measurement down, and sometime in 22, I started to track this, and I just finished 2025. So 22 to 25-ish in there. Like I said, somewhere around 89 sides with 1,075,000, if you can believe that, average sale, a 2.47 commission rate, and somewhere around $93 million. I'll look at it at the end of the call, but $93 million in sales. So I'm sitting here as the living testimony that this is exactly what I did. This is exactly what I do. It's exactly what we execute on to this very day. And we continue to improve our business. Now, when I first started really tracking and thinking about when I was in another world at another coaching program and the way that we did things very tactically and not so strategically, that I was chasing, like a lot of you would in your mind, transactions. And sure, I did plenty of transactions. In fact, I did 68 in 1 year. But when I look back, I'm like thinking to myself, my gosh, I just spun my wheels to try to do so many transactions. I wasn't even thinking about the math, and I just kept going lower and lower and lower on my average sale price, which was ranging 315 to 350. Now you're going to say, yeah, but this is a long time later and we have inflation. Yes, we do. There's no doubt about it. We have COVID inflation, no doubt about it. But we don't have a tripling. Okay. We don't have a tripling in inflation of what my average price would be. It came from being very strategic. It came from being very tactically disciplined inside those strategies. And I'm very disciplined to this day because of it. And thanks to this course and thanks to you all as the backdrop. And I can only beg you to copy me, because you will get in your own way, your own special result. And it won't necessarily be $1,075,000 average sale. That's not the point. The point is for you to sell one property at in and around the median price so that you realize that you can have proof of concept for yourself. Again, I could parade all sorts of people through here showing you, from a client standpoint, Grant Van Dyke, Lee Stillwell probably being two of the best, Roberto Gonzalez, also affectionately known as Bobby Elon, being one of the newer ones, executing the plan and getting the result. And then the whole youth movement in this group, from Danielle Gonzalez now to Annabelle being one of our now, we probably have to graduate her up to a junior in college now, Luke Kraus, all of them, when they execute, they also get the same result. So those are different locations. Those are different age brackets of people. So it is, this system doesn't discriminate based on your experience, your age, your geography. It doesn't discriminate. But it does discriminate against those who will not give it the old, real elbow greased effort, right? You have to push on this flywheel. Like Sisyphus, you have to roll the rock up the hill. And yes, it's going to roll back on you from time to time. But Albert Camus wrote a great book called The Myth of Sisyphus. And Sisyphus is, Greek mythology and the whole story of rolling the stone up the hill, and it keeps rolling back on him. And Albert Camus imagines him relatively towards the end of the book, smiling, toiling with a smile. And I would say that's me. I know that the rock is going to roll back on me pretty regularly, but I like the burden and I like the effort to have to push it back up. And I would say, because I know I can rely on everything that's been built for strength beneath it, and I can continue in that vein, right? So I'm going to go into next. You should be seeing Caring for Your Sellers, and we'll zip through these and then we'll go into some Q&A, okay? And a reminder, I am not here next week. I am in England, and the time zone difference is too big of a difference to do this call. So we will skip next week, and then we'll pop through a couple, and I'll probably take a shorter break between the two, a week, and then we'll be back at it, okay? All right, so let us do the slideshow instead. Okay, Caring for Your Sellers. So how do you introduce yourself professionally to sellers? So as you're getting into this client care thing, again, like I said, when I'm coaching, I take you back a little bit. I don't just bring you tactically right into that piece of the assembly line. So that's what I'm doing here. The best beginning to a relationship with a seller is to what? Give away your best what to do information for free. So in this 12-step course, what does that relate to? It relates to the seller package, right? That's what it relates to. It relates to giving that away for free. Now, of course, we might be mailing that, so it would look a little bit differently from handing it to somebody. So, but again, that is my best what to do information for free. And I make that distinction because I remember learning this marketing concept, watching a lot of the picks and shovels salespeople, I would say, like the Brendan Burchards, the Frank Kerns, and, I forgot so many of their names now, all Dan Kennedy disciples who were selling the way to do it. They were saying, okay, here's what you do to get this. But then they would upsell you how to do it if you joined their coaching program for $2,500, right? So, and then there was another upsell from that, all Dan Kennedy funnel upsell stuff. And hopefully, if they were honest people, that funnel did add more value as you went up. So we're copying that, right? We're giving away our best what to do information for free. So the real core of that is the seller and the buyer plan, right? Those are the two things that we're giving away that guide them. In this case, it's a 7 steps to sell your home. Here's what to do. Now, whether you're going to do that with or without me is irrelevant at that moment, because this is a unique selling proposition information product, right? In other words, I'm going to be unique by proposing to give you a free information product that includes at its base a plan. Here's a plan. If you never talk to me again, here's what to do. And I'm giving it to you for free. And that's an incredibly important point to say that's the way you're starting with somebody, right? You're starting a relationship off by being professional above and beyond everybody else by giving something free, which makes you unique, right? So what are the benefits of giving to the sellers? Well, when you give away your best information for free, you do what? You empower the seller and you open up a competitionless lane. So very quickly, very early on, when you're trying to prospect one of these sellers and set them up to become your client properly, because it's going to work. They're going to become your clients. So you're going to get these people. But if you have involved them in this co-created relationship, you gave it to them, they involved themselves in reading it or consuming it to whatever level, you've empowered them. Okay. And when you do that, instead of being like everybody else who's trying to take their business, you're trying to magnetically attract their business. There is a massive difference. I'm not saying you're getting rid of your competition. I'm just saying you're doing it so differently. You're in a lane over here that's competitionless, where everybody else is, oh, my resume and my company and, my website, they're all saying the same things, right? It sounds just all repetitive. So nothing's being said that's different, right? So now let's just say we've set them up with all that plan. That's going to make your future, when I ask you, how do you set yourself up for a clear listing and selling process? Well, it's best to chunk up your steps and educate the seller that you'll be following that exact process and reviewing it with them all along the way. So we gave it to them when we turned them from lead to prospect. They digest it. We continue to give them insightful information around it. But then we make them this promise that, listen, when you become my client, this is the 7-step plan I'm going to be going through. I'm still surprised at how many of my one-on-one coaching members don't discipline themselves to slow down and really articulate that, but really take a beat to have them understand this is why we don't wing listing presentations. We don't wing it, because you're going in there to make them a promise about a process, and a 7-step process at that you're going to be taking them through. And this is exactly what's going to happen when you give me this listing, right? We've sat here. We've already started to talk about pricing it right. We've even done a net sheet. I've told you do this to condition it and don't do that. I've told you move this furniture out, move this furniture here, right? And then I've told you the 3 steps to marketing that are going to lead to me getting, into the push marketing, especially with open houses. This is really what we're going to do right along the way. And so you're making this promise to them of how you're going to behave. So now they become your client. So how detailed and organized is that onboarding process? Because now it does get pretty tactical, right? Because now you have to do all the hard stuff with, putting all the little micro details into the MLS and all of that stuff, right? So, but if you're establishing a very transparent checklisted process for onboarding a listing, and including the seller is critical, because people will support what they help create. I keep forgetting to fix these slides, right? So the point is, if I tell you, okay, in my case, it's Laura, because my business is chopped up into people now. But originally, I had a multi-step process for the minute they went from a prospect to a client. And I was transparent with that to say, here are all the things we are going to do, so that you need to, know this. And I learned over time that I needed them to be part of that process. So we created things like, and by the way, an easy way to do this would be to get a seller disclosure plan form, to give that to them, even if your state doesn't require it, to have them go through things and describe the property to you. Then you fill out an MLS sheet and you show it to them, and you incorporate all of that. right? So I mean, incorporate them in all of that. So they're co-creating this listing because it's complicated, it's detailed, and nobody knows the property better than them. You're never going to know the property better than them. Maybe you have more of a technical understanding of some of the building materials and things like that, but you're never going to know emotionally what it's like to live there, what the benefits of living there are. When did they do things, when didn't they? So this checklisted process is not to keep them in the dark and have them wondering what the heck's going on. It's very tight with us. So, for example, today, one of my past clients who's actually looking to make a big personal upgrade decided to sell an investment condo, and he's going to sell his house, but he's ready to go with the condo. And I walked out there, and this guy's a decision maker. So immediately, Laura was all over that onboarding process. I said, it's go time, go, right? Here's the price. And then she knows exactly what to do from there. And I said, and by the way, I need to get into the property because I need to see it and meet the tenant. Boom. It's like tight. That's going on as we speak. And I don't know how quickly we'll get the photographer out there, but everything has already been put into motion because she knows that that's a priority, that as the client care management person responsible for all these details, if she needs me, she'll let me know. But otherwise, hot potato, it's in her hands. She goes through it with him. And even though he's a past client, he hasn't listed one with us in a while. So now he's going to have to go through this with us and see all this stuff. And I've already been out there to coach him in the 7 steps. Place is immaculate, so there was very little coaching to do, right? So now how do you define caring for a seller? Well, it's critical to maintain your authority over the process and not be afraid of telling the seller what must happen to get the property sold, especially when it comes to lowering the asking price. So let me talk about this today. When I had this conversation with him, and it was so fast, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you didn't have to do it. Yeah, but I've been through it with him on his main house, so it was easy. We were pretty much down to the math, and he's an accountant by background. So I said to him, I said, Dennis, I just wanted to come over and give you the math. You think it's 500,000. There's not a lot of condos out there, and you don't have to sell this tomorrow while we're looking for this other house situation, because he would still have to sell his house. I said, so let's go to the higher end of the range. I've got 613 at the high end. Why don't you go 599? But if I don't have enough action the first 30 days, we can always come down to the 549.9, right? So I actually pushed my client today up versus downwards, but I maintained the authority when doing it about getting the subsequent price reduction when I need it. I didn't mind buying myself a little bit of time because I have strong math, and I quite frankly want to make sure that he doesn't leave $50,000 on the table, because that could make a huge difference in what I have to sell his house for. So see, it's all orchestrated in my brain based on systematic stuff, and I also know where the math's at, right? So I'm maintaining this, and I'm really caring about him, and not just getting these houses sold, but the total math package to make sure it gets done the right way, right? So then obviously from there, establishing a transparent checklisted process for closing a listing, including the seller in that process, is critical, because happy sellers are likely to repeat and refer. So you see, we interconnect into next week. When we get into that closing process, you're already thinking about that and that tightness when you're going. And I have to think about, getting him to that point and orchestrating 3 different sides to a property. And especially in the price bracket he's looking at, he's up against a lot of people that would have cash, and the people also that would sell it to him with a home sale contingency would want to see all of this being orchestrated very clearly, right? Next, buy side. Okay. Same thing. It's not a big deviation when you're caring for your buyers. It's pretty much the same. So the same thing is the best beginning to relationship with buyers is the same. Give them the buyer package. Tells them what to do, right? Now, this is a little bit trickier because it's not as formal of a situation with the buyers as is the seller, right? You're not going into this big formal presentation to get their listing. You might be meeting somebody like this at an open house, which for me, other than past clients repeating or referring, that's where I meet my new buyers. I don't spend an ounce of money trying to get a new buyer off of the internet, right? Just that ship sailed for me. I get zero interest in personally doing it. And my business, as I've told you about the numbers, is working just fine this way, and it's proliferating, right? But I'm going to sit in that open house and I'm going to give away my best information for free. And then if I can easily convert somebody, like I did and double-ended one of my listings 2 days after Thanksgiving and just closed last week, right? Double ended at $1,050,000 because I gave away my best information when I met the person right there and then, analysis, everything. So I was able to condense from lead to prospect to client within about, I don't know, 6 hours. But it was all my best giveaway stuff. And then there are others that I gave the package to in 2025 that Kathy, my telemarketer, followed up long-term and she converted them, right? So again, the same thing. By giving away this information, I'm empowering the buyer to open up a competitionless lane with them. So a lot of those buyers that are running around to open houses, in my case, are going to, see a bunch of houses and nobody's going to educate them. And a lot of these people don't really have a clue as to where they want to be and how to get there. So they're not educated and they've met me too. So that's a big advantage. So same thing. How do you set yourself up for a buyer acquisition process? Well, chunk up your steps and have them ready, right? So you're educating the buyer with the exact process and reviewing it with them. So I might have a small window in a house that says, listen, my buyer plan's in here. I don't know where you're at in this process, but it's probably best that you decide how much money you're going to spend or get pre-qualified. And then you can match it up with sold properties. I'm going to give you a small batch of solds here, but let me make sure I have your best contact information. I'll send you some more because that's the right way to start. And that's part of our 6-step process. Boom. That's a presentation. That's what that is. I don't have to go through, sit down with me and let's go through all these 6 steps. I don't need to do that. I can highlight it and I can tell them where they are in the process and I can organize them and tell them how they should go through this process and with or without me. I heard somebody downstairs in the coffee shop today. She started, and she's an agent friend of mine from Sotheby's, and she was in there like, I don't know, it's such a slippery business. And she was in there saying, oh, well, did you sign a buyer-client contract with that person? And it's like, all right, she has an agent. Why you having this conversation, right? And the lady was a little bit uncomfortable and, you could tell it was just weird. And she's a good agent, by the way, this gal I'm talking about, but it was funny to see it from a competitor. It's just so it's so ugly, but she's a likable character. So if that lady wasn't with somebody, it would be a way. And I don't know how she onboards people, but it's certainly not the way we do it. Because what I would have been doing is getting her information, find out where she was, putting together a buyer package for her, and maybe even hand delivering it to her that day, right? So establishing a transparent checklisted process for onboarding a buyer and including them is not as complicated because you don't have this big listing thing, but it is onboarding them onto what? Getting them into, the MLS. And making sure they understand that these automated updates are now, they don't have to go to Zillow anymore because automated updates straight from the source that feeds Zillow is going to be in their email, but they have to make sure they onboard it correctly. You're going to get a double opt-in. You have to click on that link. I'll call you to make sure it's there, right? And then, hey, by the way, what's your best mailing address? Because while we're going through this, we continue to mail you pictures and details. So in a summary way, in case you miss things online, you get them. That's what I mean. You're going to tell somebody in a checklisted way how you're going to help them, right? So again, how do you define caring for a buyer? Well, you're maintaining this authority over this process. You're telling them, this is the best way to buy a house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And you're not afraid to tell the buyer what must happen to purchase the right property at the best price, especially when it comes to negotiation. How do you arrive at this moment in time? How do you know which ones you're going to miss out on? I told one of my buyer clients the other day, I said, listen, I just want you to know, she just told me that there's a guy coming down here with a contractor. He goes, yeah, it's been on the market for 175 days. I said, I know, Paul, but I'm just going to tell you, it's a weird business like this. A property can be on for a long time, and then all of a sudden 2 people show up at once. I know this. I'm a listing agent. It happens regularly. So I'm just telling you that. I don't think we should do anything else. And if there's a bidding war, we shouldn't chase this one. Let's try to figure out a number, and let's stay to that number. And if we don't get it, let's move on. So we made a $3.2 million offer, a huge number for this house that needed a lot of work. I always felt like it was a good deal. It's kind of what he wanted, but I didn't love it. And so we went hard at 3.2, stopped. It went away from us. The other people tied it up. And then I went out and previewed a property he's moving from Oklahoma. I previewed a property for him and it was stellar. It's way more up his alley and he would keep his beach house, blah, blah, blah. That's authority. And that's what I mean. I'm giving you an anecdote so you can see. I'm telling him this. And when I was in the house previewing it, by the way, I've told you this all the time. You want to care for your buyer clients, you're the buyer, not them. So the minute they asked about this property, Laura, book it, I went and saw it. I took all my videos, I saw it, I previewed it, I saved them the time by seeing it. And this one, like, yep, you got to see this one. This is right up your alley. Here's what it is. It's different from this other property. I am the authority, so much so that I'm actually acting as if I'm the buyer. And the one in Plymouth, Massachusetts, think home of the Pilgrims, right? I went to that one too first and had a big walkthrough in a tour. So I'm like a scout, but I'm also scouting out what's happening for him when it comes to like how many offers, did anything happen? And when I'm alone with the broker, sometimes they're more forthcoming with me. So I already know exact, and plus I know this broker. I know exactly where the deal's at, and he loves that, right? Because he comes in and he's not anxious about what's going to happen, so he knows what it's going to look like to negotiate the price and terms, right? So same thing too. You have to really, really transparently walk a buyer through things, especially when they have a sell by. And I have multiple people. I sold him something, which I neglected to mention 2 years ago, and he's done a fantastic job. And the neighbor is a nightmare, and that's why he's selling it. But we got such a good deal on that one. I told him at the time, listen to me, pay full price of this tonight, tie it up, and he did. And I think we instantly made about $250,000 to $300,000. And now that's coming to fruition. So I have acted as his buyer authority multiple times, telling him what I thought. Now, again, you might be intimidated. You might say, yeah, Danny, but that's you after all these years. Yes, you're right. Some of that's true. However, in either of those situations, you would find that I did an analysis on the property. I didn't just say those things. I had an analysis done very quickly, and I knew exactly where that price was supposed to be, so that I was making a quantitative, leadership, authoritative commentary about really talking about how this would be. And I was about to say how I would do it if it were me. And no, that's not true. How I do it with everybody in the plan. And what we're changing is just the particular houses and things that he's looking at. But I'm not afraid to tell him what's what. These people are silently begging to be led, and some not so silently, right? I have another client who's a seller, by the way, at the same time. And I told Laura the other day, I said, yeah, you better let me talk to her alone, because she gets herself pretty worked up pretty quickly. And I have a very, very clear relationship with her where she respects my authority. Not that she disrespects Laura, but she hired me because she's a mega authority in her world, and she recognizes authority in others. And so she sensed that in me immediately when I went and gave the presentation. Remember what we talked about, the onboarding of somebody, how you treat them early on is their expectation when they're a client. And she asked for it. And I said, listen, I won't mention her name, but listen, I'm it. No more. You'll come to me when there's these hairy moments. Okay. I'll have Laura just send stuff to me. So that was that, because I want her to be happy and repeat and refer. Okay. All right. Voila. There it is. That is how we do it with the client care stuff. So why don't we, let me just make sure I stop sharing my screens. Why don't we go into some Q&A and see what's going on, right? Questions. Go. Shoot. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yep. Yep. Sure. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, you're talking about the assessment. Assessment. Mm, it's alright. That's all right. What do you mean they go back 3 years? Help me understand what you're saying, because an assessed value is a lagging you're right, it's a lagging indicator of value, but it gets reassessed in the town of Barnstable, the city of Boston each year. In Seattle, it's a new number each year. Yes or no? Every year. Yeah. Okay. So it's the same. It's supposed to be the same everywhere because they're supposed to approximate what a ready, willing, and able as a federal mandate, all of these municipalities are supposed to approximate what a ready, willing, and able buyer would have to pay. So yeah. Well, I don't agree with you. See, so this is what I'm trying to get to. What I would do is just look at you don't know whether it's going to help you make the case for what you're trying to say or not until you do it. So the order of things, Paul, that I recommend to anybody, because it happens to us too. Like I'll look at that stuff and like, I don't know about right. But what I'll do instead is I'll fall forward and say, okay, because you have a condo. Condos are relatively more straightforward because you can do if you have enough comps, I hate the word. If you have enough solds in building in the last 12 to 24 months, yep. Okay. Over what time period? You got yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, good. Stop. She was qualitatively familiar, not quantitatively. She was quali Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. No, no, it's okay because this is a good one because we're diving into, like, client level stuff, which, you know yeah, Well, again, you're saying that I can't agree. Yeah, I know, but let me take the counterpoint anyway. I'm gonna take the counterpoint anyway to make a point, okay? So, what he's talking about is an analysis like this, if you're not getting the reference, okay? This is quantitative. So there's 2 ways to when you're going to a listing and you're trying to turn them into a client and you're educating a prospect, you're looking at relative analysis, okay? So it's very important to say, in his case, the most important thing would be if I had those 3 solds at 330, 330, 330, and I had their assessed values, what I should see if she's actually really worth 4 and a quarter, whatever the number was, if she's really worth 4 and a quarter, the 330 solds should tell me that, because they should tell me that based on a premium to the assessed value. So in other words, let's say all 330s had a similar assessed value, but hers was higher because she had more square footage. Because she's making the case, yeah, they're smaller, they're this, especially if they're smaller. Because with condos, it's very, very heavily weighted on, a lot of it's weighted on qualitatively. Does it have views? Is the sunny side? That's qualitative. But there's still quantitative stuff when it comes to configuration and size, and it can still make his case for him. Is what I'm trying to say. So it's still worth going back in because you're biasing yourself, because we're not our brain. Well, let me just finish. My brain, your brain, our brains are used to, we've been trained to go qualitatively, right? So who cares? Especially if you knew she was a bear, it's more about us sticking to our guns. We can make adjustments on the fly and say, listen, I'm looking at my relative analysis, and now that I'm here, quantitatively, it still makes the case. Those 330s actually help you, and they would help me sell it. Why? Because at 330, they're selling to a premium of, say, 25% to their assessed values. If I take your assessed value times 25%, it's not quite where you want it to be, but it's not far off. So if that was the story, absolutely 100% irrelevant. But if you give away all that authority because you don't do them, because you're telling yourself just the qualitative part, that's why we're not as good as we could be when we only do qualitative. And every agent you're up against can do qualitative. Then it becomes a game of who she likes. So there's no differentiation. Yeah. Yep. I've been in them. Sucks. Yeah. Remember what we said? Going backwards to analyze the genesis of something that sneaks into your business and gets you that far. If you go back to the phone call with her, did you have any indication she was non-avatar? I don't remember the call, but do you? Yeah. Well, I probably liked your tactics. Yeah. 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 Right. Well, I think the point is, yeah, right. I think the point is she's not Avatar, and I think going forward, that's what I mean. You're a guy who actually does what I ask him to do, so you do it, so you have experience. So now you know, well, there's plenty of conversations with better people than this who are actually gonna listen to me and who are actually gonna have you told me about that person, that the builder, that you had a really nice meeting with them, and it was a very high-end house. That's Avatar, right? This isn't. This is Yeah. It's not gonna work. Yeah. Yeah, it's not well, it's I mean, when I say that on average, it's not a fair fight. I would never do that again myself, and I did it. You know me. I mean, I have plenty of high I like you, so, I understand exactly what you're saying. I get cringy thinking about because I feel very uncompetitive. I'm like, "Oh my god, I'd get killed." I get killed doing that with people that I don't know, especially because I've got to be extremely different and professional. Now my resume, even in Boston, is building back up to where it needs to be. But it's just you can still do that, but I just think you're uncomfortable with the math. You're uncomfortable with it. And it's a discipline. I would never go into another discussion without math ever. Why? Because I see what it does for them. It's not so much for me. It's very clear where the math is and it doesn't lie at the end of the day, but it's very empowering to them. And it gives me a real reaction as to whether they're understanding it or not. But otherwise, I just think you're in a personality contest. I just don't want to be in that business. I don't want to be in that business. I don't want to be in the personality contest business. It's a slippery slope. It's not as predictable as a balance of that plus quantitative. Nobody's saying don't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. You know what? Funny you should say it. It definitely has. I think back in the day, I think you make me think of a lot of the older gals, and I always give them credit. I learned from watching a lot of the older gals on Cape Cod who I respected, who I thought were really good businesswomen, who were just fantastic people, people, persons. And it's a dying breed. It still works. There's no doubt to a certain extent. Jeannie Orloff, one of the best. She just sold a $10 million house. She's 80 years old and she's amazing. So good for her. I'm looking for a more predictable, consistent business with people that I don't know. So I stay very disciplined in the balance of the two. But it doesn't mean that if I feel I can make a really good human connection, we have kids in common, or which I'm thinking about two of my clients. I did. We talked, a lot of my contemporary avatar clients are right at where I'm at. They've either graduated kids or they have kids, graduating soon. I love that avatar because it's just so much in common. Most of them are professional, career people like me, business people like me. I love me a good avatar like that. And when I can get personal, I do because I like that part of it, right? The client I was talking about who was a little bit stressed out the other day, I like talking to her a lot. Right. Another guy that, he's got younger kids. I like talking to him. So I can think of the majority of my clients I'm intimately involved like that. Like this guy, Paul Maitino, I love him. He's the best and he's super loyal. But every single one of them are still watching me and listening to my math and my professionalism. And that's a big hook. That's a big hook. They know I knew my math early and then they ask me for updates of it later. So as much as they like me, I know it's that professional quantitative side of it that they need it and they want it from me and it's unique for me. So Jackie, go ahead because I'm out of time here quickly, but go ahead. I see the golden hand is in the air. I'll take it. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's if you're face to face. Yeah, that's if you're face to face. So what I would weigh in is I wouldn't go there unless I was face to face, right? But the seller qualifying questionnaire does, Jackie, you know, provoke that a little bit, right? Not it's not very specific. It just did you get offers or what happened? I might ask that on the phone of somebody. So sometimes if Kathy wants me to talk to somebody after I've driven by the house because they don't live on the Cape or they're not local in Boston, I might get on and say, looks like that looks like a winner. What happened? How far'd you get? Right? Said, I know I sent you the plan. Did you get as far as the feedback stage? Like, were people coming and going, showings? Well, no, not really. Okay, well, that's a problem. So you don't really know what the market was saying. I can't tell you whether it's a marketing issue, but we're very big on these push marketings. And if I did it, I'd have to get in there for open houses, right? So I might weave it into the conversation if I felt it was hey Shauna, Shauna. I got it. It's okay. So anyway, that's the point, Jackie, is that, yeah. I just think the bigger conversation here, looking at the 12-step plan, is avatar. And I think it's so hard when you want all of it in the beginning. Like you're talking to somebody, I'm talking to a lead today, and he's got a bunch of leads that are expired, and there's like a whole bunch of 600 of them in a big 50-mile radius. And in Bethesda, greater Bethesda, Maryland area, if you get a listing, it's like gold because of all the places here, including Seattle's bumped up to 3 months worth of inventory. Bethesda's been the tightest. So you tend to, the tighter you feel, the fewer leads you feel like are accessible, you push a little bit. But what happens over time pretty quickly is if you get enough conversations going with people, you start to recognize what avatar is. And as long as you all are good stewards of protecting your prospects, meaning once that good prospect is made, put them up in the contact pipeline manager, staring at them, babysitting them, making sure you're still in relationship, you're probably going to get a little bit more judicious on who you allow to become a prospect and then ultimately a client, right? You just because you feel a sense of plenty. You're not in that sense of scarcity, so you gain that confidence, right? So you're absolutely right on both of you. Him too. You guys are absolutely right on everything you're saying. I'm just telling you what I learned, especially over the last 5 to 6 years. As my kids got out of the house and I had more time to drive back and forth to build my book in Boston, even though we were doing business with my brother, I wasn't doing it. I'm very disciplined up there, especially. You are going to see math from me. And those people love it because there's so many of them in finance, biotech, academia. They love it. They love it because they're nerds, right? They're academic nerds. So my avatar leans academic, right? They have a decent academic background and they love the effort to see this because they've never seen it before. But see, everybody else can come in and talk qualitative, right? Yeah, I agree with you. That one sucks. Well, wait a minute. Before we throw the baby out with the bathwater, they're in your building. All these 330s affect you because they're in your building. Nobody's saying it's exactly, just hold on. Like I know that's what I would do. She's being rough with him. Just look at, and he's good like that too. He can put a stop sign up pretty well. You just say, hold on, I get it. But let me just show you how this methodology, you can throw me out of here when it's over, but let me just finish. Right. And you got to be that person. Sometimes you do, because that's what I say to the telemarketers and the Friday calls too. Hey, listen, when the dog bites, lean in. It's already too late. The dog's biting you. You might get lucky and the dog lets go and go, holy shit, you're the real deal. I'll listen to exactly what you say. Other times they continue to try, you rip your arm off and you can boot them out the door. So you have nothing to lose in these moments to test yourself, to lean in, to practice, to say, wait a minute, I know you don't, whether you don't like math or not, you'd be crazy, dumb, foolish not to listen to me explain this to you. Why? Because it's what the algorithms online do. And guess who's looking at the algorithms? The buyers. They go to Zillow, they go to Redfin, they go to realtor.com, and they look at that stuff. And they start to make estimates on value based on that. So I'm giving you math and showing you how to manipulate the math. Now, if the math is not going to support what you have, then I'm going to tell you this is like, hey, listen, there's a problem, right? Sean Grady is on here too. Right, Phil? Is that what you want to say? Hey, buddy. How you doing, pal? Good, good, good. Anything I can help with tonight while you're here? Yeah, cool. Love it. Yeah, it's if you want to, chip away, I'm not gonna tell you to go to the gym and start listening to Danny Griffin playlists, but but I will put yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you guys a funny story in a second about a guy from New York, but I'm gonna put it Sean, let me put this in, and Phil, grab this too. I started to organize yeah. Here you go. There's the playlist, boys, in there, for this course that I've been trying to clean up those playlists on YouTube, but if Sean, if you wanna go listen to some of the other topics that go with it, they're in there, okay? So, you can catch up, because unfortunately, it's weird. We got the holidays, we got this, and Phil, I know I owe you and the boys, a conversation. We have to have it before the week's out because I'm all screwed up next week in, England. So, um yeah, but take a listen to some of those things too. But I would recommend the call if you want to cheat, Sean, go to the one about the mindset. Okay, go to that one. It's a really, really important one, and I'm going to lead our conversations anyway with that. So I think if you wanted to listen to something prior to catching up with me a little bit more personally, go listen to that one. Right. And that is what week is that? That's week 3 these days. Okay. It's called Mindset, Bulletproof Your Profitable Agent Self Image, right? That's a good one. Okay. Anything real quick? Because I hate to take you guys overtime, but I started a little bit late. Yeah. So, no, yeah. 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 That's right. Yeah. 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 Well, right, and that's I was going to say, I'm glad you said that because what I was gonna say to Paul is when somebody's like that, they're intellectually insecure or maybe nervous in that moment, right? Because a lot of people are worried about being taken advantage of, and they think they're supposed to act like that. So if you don't pattern interrupt them by saying, "Whoa, slow down, I'm just trying to give you something, and I know a lot more than you do," okay? Right? You can say it out overtly like that. I mean, just Yep. Yeah, 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 you don't do this every day. I do, and I've spent the better part of, you could say, I've spent the better part of my weeks learning about this stuff, and you haven't. And so you can throw it out the door, but do me a favor, right? Be intellectually open. That kills them, right? That kills. Be intellectually open for 5 minutes. So let me tell you what I know. Now, if you think it's ridiculous, then throw it out and I'll leave. Right? And that's what I mean by lean in when the dog bites because it's good practice for you. You gain confidence because most of the time you're not going to do business with that person, but you're going to learn how to lean in and advocate for what you know and to demonstrate what you know, right? So, but again, what my bigger conversation with Paul was, don't talk yourself out of sticking to the formula no matter what. Always go with the math. You might make adjustments, the math might not work. There's sometimes, Shauna, when I have math, it doesn't work. And I'm like, something's off here because you added this and my math looks ugly. Let me go down into the qualitative things. Let me look. See this one that sold for 375? That is bigger than the 330s. It's a little bit smaller than yours. You have a better view. So I might take a data point, still saying the math, that singular number, right? That one. I might not have the whole 5 or 6 things. I might have just that one, right? But if I have both ways, quantitative and qualitative, and I can play them off of each other, then there I go, right? So, all right. Oh, go ahead. You too. The click yeah, click the link that I just put in there. And then seeing if there's I put it in the chat. In the chat. There's a link in the chat. Yeah. These things get recorded through StreamYard or straight to YouTube. So they go there as lives. I'm trying to do a better job of showing them. So yep, that's okay. There it is. It's all good. Third. Third. Yep, you're welcome. Yep, third. So it's a good, you know what, if you wanted to work on something on the week that I'm off, do the mindset again, double down on it. It's just so important, right? So okay, so remember, I'm going to say it again. No call next week because I will be on a different time zone in England, and it's not going to work. So, but I promise you, when we come back, we'll wrap this one up with a couple of weeks, and I'll only take a week off between to work on it, and we'll go from there. But I love doing this course because I'll tell you what, this is what is the backbone of my own business, and I'm certain about it. So keep plugging with it, okay? Bravissimo. I'll see you all later. Have a good night. I'll see the masterminders tomorrow. And then, of course, Fridayers, I'll see you then too. Okay. Ciao, ciao. Yep. See you, buddy.